So, Elon Musk buys Twitter, and he's going to turn it into a more free speech platform. And so that has everybody worried because, of course, everybody trying to paint everything as racism. They're saying that it's going to become a platform for white supremacists calling, people the N-word. That's what Twitter's going to become. And it's like, no. And, but he restated that his definition of free speech is speech that is protected by law. So, Europe has done this thing where they've said they're like some other countries, they're enacting really a lot of restrictions on free speech. And a lot of them are unnecessary too. They're ones that are really infringements. I mean, obviously, we don't want people organizing terrorist events using social media. But on the other hand, if someone wants to say something, have some medical information to impart, they should be allowed to do it and let the people decide, right? I mean, really, when you come right down to it, everything herbal for medicines is questionable. So that whole area could be considered, people get mad at me saying this, but could be labeled misinformation or misleading or dangerous, depending on how you look at it. Other people would look at it and say, no, this is great, this is what helped me, and great if it does. But other people might look at it and say, oh, this is all misinformation. We don't want someone treating tonsillitis with herbs, so we're just going to have to ban all this information. But, so the EU's come out again and said, oh, Mr. Elon, you're going to have to obey us, the law, the rules. And it's like, well, what happens if he doesn't? Well, they get 6% of the profits. And it's like, what? That's like cigarette tax. You're almost like encouraging people to do something that's wrong because you're making money off of it. So all of a sudden, it's in the interest of European countries that Twitter breaks the law because you're making income off of it. And that's basically what's happened in the U.S. with cigarettes, with alcohol, and everything else. At one time, they called it a sin tax. In other words, being an alcoholic or doing, tobacco was sinful. But, not exactly that, but that's kind of what they called it, this type of behavior that they really didn't want. So you do a sin tax to discourage people from doing it. You put a couple dollars of tax on each packet of cigarettes, and supposedly less people will use cigarettes. But what ultimately happens is it develops a really good stream of revenue for the government. So, let's say Elon Musk goes over there and decides not to obey the laws in Europe, which I don't think he would do that. I think he is interested in abiding by all the laws. You could just throw him a bone of giving them the 6% of the profits, and they'd be happy. It could be a lot of money, and people will continue on. So, I mean, it doesn't make sense to tax bad behavior because it encourages people in the government to, even if it's unconsciously, it encourages them to encourage that behavior because they want the funding. They create government jobs with alcohol tax and cigarette taxes and things like that. And now, if all of a sudden there's going to be fines, internet fines, at one time, you'd have to be older to know this, but at one time, environmental laws were so weak that you would have a paper plant and the local municipality would say, this is horrible what you're doing to us. We're going to fine you $250 a day every day until you change it. And they're like, great, fine. It's like that's a minuscule operating cost that they just decide they're going to pay, and it doesn't really impact them at all. So some of these fines were so ridiculously small that businesses just added them to their operating costs, and it didn't even create a bump in the profits. I mean, loss in profits or a bump in revenue or anything. It just was in there, and it was considered what you had to do to keep in business. So it's going to be quite a few years later before they actually decide that fines have to be big enough to stop people from doing the behavior, which is polluting the environment. And, later they did. But so I'm just kind of musing at this idea that if they want 6% of the profits that Twitter generates in Europe, that's kind of like nothing. That means Elon Musk gets the other 94%. So again, it's just an operating cost, unless that fine continues to go up or something. But just as a fine, it's actually just the cost of business. Just like someone else would say, like I say, oh, gee, you've got this factory going and it's polluting this stream. We're going to charge you, $250 a day that you do it because we want to protect the stream. And the company's saying, oh yeah, fine, we'll just pay it. Here's 250 days in advance for the next 100 days. And just pass them a check, and they don't have to deal with them again for 100 days. But, so, I don't know. You can tell me what you think. I don't think that it's always a constant problem for international companies to obey local regulations. And, I think it can be done. But, see, Twitter was also way into censoring, so that the probability that what the European Union's censoring wasn't already being censored on Twitter is low, because that's basically what was happening. Liberal slant censorship in Europe is already being done by Twitter. So, that didn't appear to be much of a problem. Now with, the European Union now or other countries, what about some of these African companies that have gotten so upset at Twitter? I mean, I think it was Nigeria turned it off for 4 months because they wouldn't allow one of the candidates to use it because they thought, someone in the U.S. decided he was harmful or it was misinformation or whatever it was, but they were only promoting tweets from one candidate. So that, maybe it was in Nigeria, Uganda or somewhere, they just said, okay, we'll just turn Twitter off. And, Jack Dorsey and everybody, this was back a little while, they were all crying about it and saying, oh, you're censoring us, it's so bad, it's so horrible. And it's like, well, wait a second. They turned you off because you were censoring them. It only makes sense if they think you're in. It would be like the U.S. if someone said, wait a second, the only function Twitter has is to affect the midterm elections, and we know they're overly on one side, so we'll just turn Twitter off for this year, and we'll turn it back on after November, whatever. But that's kind of the thing that one of the countries in Africa did. And I'm not sure how Twitter can operate in communist countries. I'm just not sure, even I haven't studied it that much, that, can someone in China use Twitter and actually see posts from other people? I would think it has to be heavily edited. I know that basically, when we were reading stories about this type of issues, Google going into China was like, people were complaining here because they were so heavily censoring it, but basically Google was just saying, okay, China, we want to make money here. You tell us what you want and don't want, because at least we'll make money on the leftover things that you're going to let us do. So they were completely willing to put this dictatorial communist slant into Google search results for that country. Tell me what you think. Bye.